Welcome, everybody. I've got Eric, and we are doing a three-part series on the best foils to chase for decks and for collecting. If you want to bling out your foil deck, these are the 10 from Movie Deck, Fellowship, and Expanded to think about. I'm joined by Eric from his channel, Library of Orthanc, which has about 1 million resources for deck building and all sorts of cool stuff. So link for his stuff in the video description. Really encourage you guys to go check out his stuff for even more Lord of the Rings TCG resources. But Eric, welcome on. It's been a minute, so it's great to see you.
I'm glad to be back, Matt. Yeah, good to see you again.
So I think we'll start off with Fellowship. We're going to break this into 3 videos. We're going to start off with Fellowship, though, sort of the top 10 foils to hunt in sort of Fellowship block. And I think we're going to exclude the One Rings. Is that, or the One Ring? Is that sort of?
Yeah. I thought for all of these lists, it's no fun to add the One Ring on there. If anyone knows about collecting Lord of the Rings foils, the One Ring is the top chase card for everyone, just because collectors in particular love that. Players need to have it for their decks. So yeah, the One Ring is always in, especially when you talk about Fellowship movie, those are always going to be the top chase cards. And so we didn't want to include those on our list, just the main deck cards.
Yeah, it's sort of a unfair number one. It's like, oh, big surprise. Yeah. So this excludes the One Ring, but we have 10 cards here. So this is mostly for building decks. And I'm actually starting to think about blinging out my own decks. Like as I started playing the game more, I was like, oh, it'd be fun to have foil versions.
Yeah. The idea here is obviously, not everyone's going to maybe have a foil deck gauntlet, but if you foil out your favorite deck, what's going to be the hard, kind of the top ones you want to look for, the top ones you want to chase, because these are going to be the foils that are generally highly desirable by anyone who's trying to do this. And this is one of the things I'm kind of known for is making the blinged out foil decks. So,
well, I'm glad you do it. I think it's a tremendous resource to have somebody that's, sharing their love of the game and knowledge. But with no further ado, what's number 10 on our list here? So we'll go for 10 to 1.
Yeah, and just one other quick preface here. Obviously, we tried to identify the top 10 cards. How you rank these is going to vary, and we'll talk about some of our methodology as we go through. I think as far as what we're looking for. One of the things is, do you need multiple copies of this for the deck that you're going to play it in? And this 10th card, fits very well with that rubric, and that is here. I'm going to try to grab these out too while we do it, just to maybe give you guys a little look at the foil.
And as a reminder, Fellowship block is sets 1 to 3. So that's cards from those first 3 sets. Very popular, very fun play format.
Yeah, for sure. And easiest one to get into too. So,
yeah.
So what I picked as card number 10 is the Servant of the Secret Fire. That one is really cool, foiling there of the actual fire. So that's one thing, obviously, Lord of the Rings does a great job of, is foiling these cards. So Servant of the Secret Fire, picked that because, when you're playing a Gandalf deck and relying on him as one of your main companions, that's going to be your best pump spell. So you're usually seeing this at 3 to 4 copies. And why it's so good is the one thing to always remember is this isn't just -3 for the minion skirmishing Gandalf. It's -3 for any minion skirmishing anyone, as long as you spot Gandalf. So it was one of those reading the card explains the card type things, but it's a really nice, very versatile, because as long as Gandalf is alive, it's a pump for anyone. So.
And just a rough price range, it's maybe like 100 to 150. I think a lot of these are going to kind of be in that range, but I think that's rough.
Yeah, and the range is obviously very broad depending on availability and so forth. But yeah, that's a fair estimate for that one.
Yeah, I haven't really played too much Gandalf recently being the last 5 years. So, all right, what about number 9 on our list here?
All right, so then number 9 on the list we have, let me grab here.
The thing about having so many cards, it's like piles. Which pile did I put the card
in?
Yeah,
these are still in the decks. I didn't take them all out for the video because I didn't want to have a stack of 10 and then be like, hey, where did these come from?
No, I know exactly the pain there.
So bear with me a little bit here, but the number 9 card that we have for the list is Aragorn's Bow.
Ooh.
Maybe not as amazing of a foil, but again, nice selective foiling there done on the card. But obviously a very important card for a great deal of decks, because Aragorn is going to be one of your top companions in the Fellowship block. And then typically when you see this played, you're going to see it played at 2 copies. You don't usually see any more than that, but very strong card because, of course, natively it makes Aragorn an archer. And then it also gives him basically like the Legolas Greenleaf ability of exert the character to wound a minion. And obviously the wounding part is key because even though you're exerting, you can actually wound the minion, so you can take minions off the table with this. So just a very strong card for not just archery decks, but, you know, almost any deck that's playing Aragorn is typically looking to play a couple of copies of this card.
Yeah, especially for removing sort of pesky 1-life goblins before they get assigned.
Yeah, super important to help defend against Swarm. Yeah, that's another important function of the card.
All right, and in 8th place, we have...
In 8th place, we have...
This is a favorite of Bilbo and Frodo.
Yes, it is. Yeah, in this format, just Frodo, obviously. And that's the one thing, obviously, in Fellowship, the weapons are typically more limited to one single character. So this can only be played on Frodo. I always thought even it would have been cool if it could be Frodo or Sam, but, you know, limited to just Frodo. And this is Sting. So Sting is obviously very crucial for almost every deck. So you're going to see, I'd say, pretty safe to say, play 1 copy in every deck. And many decks in this era are going to play 2 copies. So it's not going to be one that you load up 3 or 4 of, but it's just going to be a universally used card. Again, very strong against limiting the Swarm by using the ability on Sting to remove Twilight for the orcs that are revealed. This, I'd say, is one of probably the most severe design flaws in Fellowship block, is that Sting only affects orcs and not Uruk-hai. Uruk-hai are already kind of better, and then when you have a universal nerf effect like this that affects the orcs and not the Uruk-hai, yeah, I think that's where one of the things that further makes Uruk-hai a powerhouse in this format.
And with weapons, I realized we forgot to do the price on Aragorn's bow and Sting. I think they're both kind of in that 100 range, which I know is less than the Servant of the Secret Fire.
Yeah, I'd say it's less than Servant of the Secret Fire. I'd put both of those in maybe the probably not even up to 100, maybe more in that $70-$80 range, I'd say, probably for Aragorn's bow and Sting.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you might wonder why is Servant of the Secret Fire lower. It's really because, you know, every deck is going to run a Frodo, right? And every deck is most likely going to think about running an Aragorn, right? Versus Gandalf is more selective, I think. You're not always going
to and every deck's going to run 1 Sting, but like I said, if you're wanting to run Servant of the Secret Fire, you're probably wanting to run 4, and so that really drives up the people who use it need more copies of it.
All right. And in 7th place, we have...
Right. 7th place here. Again, another one of my favorites here. But this is... thought I had one available here. This is a top minion. And there we go.
Minion. I feel like...
Yeah, calling it a minion is a bit of an oxymoron. I wish you could have had kind of like the Overlord people have a different type. So this is Saruman, the Keeper of Isengard. Just an absolutely fantastic card. And when you talk about wanting this in multiples, if you're playing Uruk-hai, you're absolutely wanting this 3 to 4 copies, most likely 4. Quick refresher for people for the gameplay of what this does is it says that all Uruk-hai are fierce. So you basically take those damage +1 minions, and now you get to skirmish with them double. So that is just incredibly overpowered. And then to make matters worse, Saruman can't take wounds during the archery phase, and he can't be skirmished. So you can't just knock him off the table and take that ability away. He's pretty much just sitting there, acting more of as like a condition, but one that you can't remove. So very incredibly strong. And then finally, even you can exert him to prevent wounds to Uruk-hai. So just kind of like 3 lines of text that are all just like incredibly synergistic and incredibly powerful. And, you know, what really contributes to that, again, Uruk-hai being a dominant deck type in this format is, you know, Saruman, Keeper of Isengard. I will say he's from the Realms of the Elf Lords set, which more short printed than Fellowship, let's say, but also you will find that more people, if they're set collectors, they're starting out with set 1, and there's more demand maybe for set 1. So maybe a little less demand for this guy just because he's in the 3rd set as far as collectors go. But for foil builders for decks, this is absolutely one that you should be looking to get your hands on if you're trying to make a foil deck.
Totally agree, and maybe around 100, 120 bucks, maybe give or take.
Yeah, I put that in the same range there. Yeah.
All right, what about Goblin Armory, which is our next on our list?
Yeah, Goblin Armory I have next on the list at number 6. Now, why I don't have that higher is just because of what we've been mentioning about how dominant Uruk-hai are in this format. Goblins are definitely Moria Swarm Goblins are definitely going to be your second best option to play in this format, but I think it's pretty clearly a second best option. And, this card, of course, absolutely essential for that deck. And this is one of my favorite Lord of the Rings foils, too, just because the armor on the Goblin is just really nicely foiled. And what's so nice about this card, of course, is it's a 0-cost condition, which is kind of like the gold standard for Lord of the Rings, of just being able to put it down and cycle it, 0 cost, can throw it down on the table whenever you want. I think the biggest reason why in Fellowship block this might struggle a little more than Uruk-hai is that sleep care address and condition removal is strong for the Fellowship. So if you're playing Moria, you've got a huge support area of conditions that your opponent can wipe out, and it really hurts you, versus if you're Uruk-hai, you're not relying on your conditions as much. So it's a little more fragile in that regard. And then, like you talked about, there are silver bullets like Aragorn's bow, or even Aragorn, Ranger of the North himself, which makes it very hard for you to swarm, or Boromir, Son of Denethor, to pump your hobbits. So swarm is not always necessarily as reliable as just beat down like Uruk-hai. So.
All right, next we have number 5 on our list, a fan favorite. A card I'd love to have signed someday, but Aragorn, Ranger of the North.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this guy, obviously, and yes, very, very strong and a really cool looking foil too. I'll pull it out here as we're chatting about this, but basically, you've got Aragorn exert to make himself defender +1, and this is kind of one of the questions that beginners will ask as well. Can I exert twice to be defender +2 and 3 times be +3? Absolutely, yes, you can. And that's what really makes this card strong, is that it has the ability to do that. And then fellowship wise, yeah, it's just a great defensive card against those swarms, and just a solid Aragorn. But then too, finally found where I had one. It has that really cool fire foiling too of Aragorn with the flaming brand, which I think is just very iconic for the Fellowship format. Flaming brand, actually, as I'm saying, it didn't make the list. That's probably would be one of our honorable mentions. It's just a slightly less expensive card than most of the ones that are on this list, so not as hard to chase. But Aragorn with the foil flaming brand there, I think is just one of the top coolest foils there too. And yeah, definitely well received spot on the list.
Yeah, very versatile, more versatile than well, I guess another Aragorn's on the list, but just a versatile kind of good for everything card. And I guess real quick price checks. Goblin Armory is more expensive. It might be the most expensive card on this list.
I think Armory is probably the most expensive on the list. You're pushing 175 probably with the Armory, maybe even up to 200 depending. So you're looking at that range for Armory, and yeah, I don't think any of the other ones get quite up that high.
And then Aragorn's maybe like 100 plus,
Yeah, 100, maybe creeping up to that 150 range now too, as well. Yeah, as for that Aragorn. And that one in particular, I guess, for Fellowship, it is more common maybe to see that as a splash companion, where it is very good to just play one copy of that card. If you're not really wanting to have a full Aragorn deck, throw one of that in there is still easily going to be worth it almost all the time. But then obviously you can play multiple copies as well.
All right. Next, we have number 4 on our list, which is Gandalf, Friend of the Shire Folk.
Yeah. This one I find to be the most solid, widely played Gandalf in the Fellowship block. Reason being is there wasn't really any hate at that time that prevented you from playing multiple companion cultures. And this is really what thrives off of playing multiple cultures. Basically, this Gandalf gets one higher strength every different culture that you spot. A little more nuance than that: hobbit, elf, man, dwarf, whatever. But the point is as you have a rainbow fellowship, he gets stronger, and rainbow fellowship is far and away the most strong strategy in fellowship block, because the cultures haven't developed far enough where you can have all elves or all Rohan or all Gondor or whatever. So everyone's going to be playing rainbow, and then this guy really excels in rainbow. He's really essential, like I said, to play that sleep care address if you want to be able to keep your opponent's conditions under control, and just the best solid all around Gandalf.
Great looking photo as well. So
Absolutely.
In our number 3 slot, we have an Uruk-hai staple, Savagery, to match their numbers. And by the way, the Gandalf card is kind of on that 100, and I'd say Savagery is a little bit less, maybe 75.
Yeah, I'd say Gandalf is probably 100 plus, and Savagery is probably 100 minus, or that 80 to 100 range. Yeah. And here's that Savagery. I do have that one handy. Love that. Anyone who plays Uruk-hai, this is a fantastic card. This you probably can't see in the light, but the light shining through the trees is what's foiled. They just did such a great job, I think, of like choosing which parts of these cards to foil. But why this is so popular, of course, is this is just an absolute essential 4 of in any Uruk-hai deck. Just the most no-brainer. It plays for 0. If your opponent has 5 companions, you just go on them with a strength +4 fierce Uruk-hai. The bonus is just way too high, such that generally your best strategy when playing Uruk-hai is just to stay at 4 companions so that they can't even use this on you, and that they're just limited to this being a +2 pump for 0, which is totally a serviceable card. But when it goes to +4 and fierce, and the +4 carries with you in the fierce skirmish, it's just unfair, and quite frankly needed an errata at the time it was played.
All right, number 2, we have another familiar face, Aragorn, Heir to the White City, which I think this might be my favorite foil in the Fellowship block, I think.
Yeah, this is an absolutely beautiful foil. So this one is a choke card, but also incredibly versatile, even if you're not really looking to choke. This was banned immediately after Fellowship block, and for good reason. Essentially, his effects says when the Fellowship moves in the Fellowship phase, remove 2. What that amounts to is that you can play up to 2 cost of card every turn for free. And when you express it that way, it's like, oh, that's kind of a little too good to get that kind of recurring free deployment of other cards. But that's really what makes this Aragorn shine, and quite honestly why he's banned and why he's not allowed in those other formats. And yeah, just a very cool, iconic. This is the kind of picture everyone. Aragorn is the man's man who everyone wants to be Aragorn, and this is just like the great picture of that. Is like the badass warrior, fighting the Uruk-hai or whatever. So that, really cool looking card. And I will say this is actually probably recently, it's gone up a lot in price. And this is probably the most expensive card on the list, because this one, from what I've seen, is pushing 200, 250, even with the Heir to the White City. So great card though. And many Fellowship decks will use this as a play set. And then the cool thing, though, of course, in Fellowship is you do have the Prancing Pony, so you can pull Aragorn if you win the bid or if your opponent starts it. And so being able to just pull this out of your deck on site 1 is also tremendously overpowered. So throwing one, it's another one of those cards that throwing 1 in there to pull at site 1 is a pretty nice play.
Yeah, it makes sense banning him. But
and when you take it to the extreme and combine it with other choke elements, it becomes oppressive. On his own, though, he's just a incredibly strong, overpowered card as well. So,
All right, and our final slot. I know we kept saying this might be the most expensive card. This might have been. I think this
Oh
also.
yeah, we topped it again. Yeah, so number 1 and number 2 are the two most expensive cards. So the most expensive card, and this what's interesting about this card, yeah, he's I'd say up in the 275 300 range, and that is Legolas Greenleaf. And like what I was just about to say here is what's interesting about him is you really never play more than one of him in a deck, but you also really never play less than one. This is kind of the iconic card that like you're going to want to have every single deck because it's so good. It's so splashable. It's startable as a companion in many fellowships are going to look to have this in their starting fellowship. And it's just a cool, iconic foil. It really checks all the boxes except for the multiple copies.
Yeah, I don't see a good reason to not run one Legolas. Like, unless your strategy is, I couldn't really think of a strategy off that way.
Yeah.
But so that's our top 10 list. Obviously, that did not include any rings, but those are sort of the 10. If you're thinking about building foil decks and fellowship, those are the 10 to really think about. And values obviously also attributed or related to demand here. So, they're going to be high demand cards, so more expensive. But we'll be back with Movie Block, which is sets 1 through 10 next time, and then Expanded, which includes all the way up to set 18. I guess 19 technically. But that's all we have for now. Check out Eric's channel, and we'll catch you guys later.